All right, good morning. How many people were in the previous session? Okay, so most of you, so I'll try to minimize the reuse, particularly of some of my poorer jokes. My name is Ryan Sokolowski. I'm a senior program manager with ECG CAT. Those two acronyms mean Enterprise Cloud Group, which is the new name for the Windows Server System Center organization at Microsoft. And we also include a little thing called Azure in that. And CAT is the CAT team stands for Customers, Architectures, and Technologies. We are essentially the team that owns what formerly used to be called all the TAP programs. It's now CCEP, which is Customer Continuous Education Program, as well as all the MVPs. And it's really our focus to gather feedback from our enterprise customers, small to medium business customers, service providers, and drive that feedback back into engineering. So I'm very, very fortunate and very lucky. Couldn't be happier to be at Microsoft. It's a very unique position to be in because I've been right where you guys are sitting. I've been at other companies in enterprises, and so I'm very passionate about what we do at Microsoft, and as well, I'm very passionate about making sure that customer feedback is what's driving our product improvement. I know that sounds really corny, but honestly, for me, it's very true. I'm not a salesperson. Otherwise, I would have retired a long time ago. Little to none of that has anything to do, as I used that joke in the previous session, with what we're here to talk about today. We are here to talk about the private cloud certification exams, 246 and 247. So this is part 2 of the session. In a little bit unusual fashion, we actually tackled 247 in the previous session, which most of you were here for. Thank you for returning. This session will primarily focus on 246, although it's not exclusive. And there is certain bleed over, obviously, between the two exams, and we'll touch on that. So today's objectives hopefully help you successfully prepare to take 246 and 247 and give you some insight into the new item types, the questions, the formats, and maybe if we have some time, a little bit of methodology around tackling that. Takeaways are obviously certification exam information and the exam topics and sample questions. So the format, as we said in the previous session, if this doesn't suit you, when I finish the next minute or two, that would be an appropriate time if this isn't the right session for you to get up and you could potentially find another session that's more to your interest. What we're basically going to go through is all of the what's called the objective domain, which is a fancy word for the outline, which is the exam outline or objective domain that's listed on the Microsoft site. We're going to go through each objective and then the subheadings, talk about those a little bit, and then the majority of the session will be, again, my sample questions, that most of the questions I wrote myself. In a former part of my life when I was not a Microsoft employee, after I left Microsoft and before I came back, I spent a great deal of time actually creating Microsoft exams. So I have participated in all phases of the process, from creating the objective domain, writing the actual items, editing them, doing the alpha reviews, the whole thing. So I certainly didn't put nearly as much time into these questions as an actual item that you would see on the exam, but these are probably pretty good representations of certain things. And some of the items have been written to illustrate certain points and takeaways, as those of you who were in the previous session saw. Again, this exam, just like 247, is a mile wide and yards deep. I would question the yards deep part. That's actually left over from somebody else's deck. these are the only two exams that really dive into all of the System Center products, and I mean all of them, with the restraint put around Configuration Manager primarily. I believe Configuration Manager could certainly come into play as a contextual or environmental variable, perhaps in a question on these exams. But as most of you know, there are separate Configuration Manager exams. There are no separate Operations Manager or VMM or Service Manager exams. These are it, kids. So there's a great deal of breadth that you have to grasp and be prepared to address on these exams. And I didn't mention it in the previous session, but frankly, I think 247, at least the way I think, the way I operate, the type of engineer that I am, 247 is the configuring and deploying. I found that exam to be much more enjoyable for my psyche. 246 I found less pleasant, just because of my background. I'm generally more of an architect, designer, deployer, rather than an admin, operator, monitor kind of person. So your mileage may vary, but obviously it doesn't really matter. As this slide illustrates, you need both of these exams for the MCSE private cloud certification. So on the left-hand side of the screen, you can see exam 410, 411, 412. Those are the three core Windows Server 2012 exams that will allow you to achieve the MCSA, Microsoft Certified Solutions Associate, on Windows Server 2012. And then after that, it branches off to the three MCSE tracks that you see here: desktop infrastructure, server infrastructure, and then private cloud. And again, notably, there's certainly no need to take these exams in numerical order. It does not matter. You could certainly you could actually do them in reverse order. You could take a private cloud one and then go back and take 411, and then you could take the other private cloud one and then go do 410. It doesn't matter. You have to pass all of them, so whatever you feel like is kind of the point there. So my slide is in this deck. It was not in the previous one. This was the point that I was trying to make, and this slide was missing in the previous deck. The two exams, obviously the reason we started with 247 is it's about configuring and deploying rather than monitoring and operating, which you certainly need to configure and deploy before you monitor and operate. Hence why we tackled 247 first. That was really the only thinking there. In a general sense, and as you'll see as we go through the sample questions, you'll probably find that they're 247, certainly much more probably about Virtual Machine Manager and some of those pieces. Probably much less around Service Manager, for example, or Orchestrator. Although certainly within scope and fair game, 246 is monitoring and operating. So there's probably going to be a lot more on this exam around, guess what, our friend Operations Manager jumps to mind. Perhaps Data Protection Manager, because that's part of operating a private cloud, right? Is all your backup and recovery. Service Manager comes into play. Orchestrator, runbooks and scripting and so on for operating and monitoring the private cloud. So sort of a distinction between the exams, but you're certainly going to see all of the System Center products touched on, and it's just a question of what percentages you'll see those focused on in the two exams. Again, regardless, doesn't matter because you have to take both of them to get the MCSE private cloud. So, flip a coin. It doesn't matter which one you take first. You have to take the other one next. This was stripped out of the other slide too. I didn't think this would still be in here. So I'm going to touch on this super briefly. For those who were in the previous session, you don't want to hear it again. For those who weren't, Some tips and tricks, if you're if you allow yourself or it's permitted, have some coffee or some caffeine. Some people don't do caffeine. Drink a cup of coffee 30 minutes before you go in and take your exam. It can actually have an effect. It can make a difference. Chew gum while you're taking the exam. Some studies have shown that the action of chewing gum, the jaw action, can actually improve your concentration and focus abilities. And then I threw a couple exercise pictures in here. There was a place, I used to live in another state before Microsoft recruited me, and my testing facility was on a higher floor. And I used to wait for an empty elevator, and I would shadow box in the elevator. I think that's the first time I've ever told anybody that. So I would make sure I was alone in the elevator so people wouldn't think I was insane. But I would shadow box in the elevator on the way up just to kind of get pumped up and psyched up to take the exam. If we have some time left at the end, I'll talk about some more things for those who weren't in the previous session. So diving in, monitoring and operating a private cloud. So these are the 5 top-level exam objectives. And we're not going to read through them here because we have breakouts for each one of them on subsequent slides. But you can see here the percentages. And this is directly off of the Microsoft.com/learning link for the objective domain. So configuring data center process automation includes 2 major categories: implementing workflows and service offerings. So workflows deals with implementing orchestrator runbook automation. And you'll have to apologize, I used some acronyms, but if you're taking this exam, we can probably flow with that. Automate remediation of incidents, including resolution of virtual machine-based incidents. So as you're reading these are right off of the objective domain, the outline for the exam. These should resonate with you. Building and designing end-to-end automation, incorporating System Center 2012 technologies, and implementing change control and problem resolution workflows, which to me says System Center again. And then implementing service offerings, know how to add a new service offering to the service catalog. I would probably be willing to guess that most of you in this room are not super great with Service Manager. That's probably one of our weaker skill sets. Is that fair to say? Anybody expert in Service Manager in the room? No? Okay. Yeah, so what's that? Okay. Creating a custom workflow using the Service Manager console, referencing orchestrator workflows, and then implementing self-service provisioning of virtual machines, which is truly one of those classic tenets in the definition of what a private cloud is that ability. So we're going to jump into questions. And just to go back so you're not staring at the question, I apologize. What we're going to do for those who weren't in the previous session, we're going to throw a question up. I'll read through it, and we're going to give you some time to kind of come up with your own answer. Please don't shout it out. Let everybody kind of lock in their own answer in their head. And then we're going to go to the answer and look at that and talk about it briefly. Not here to put anybody on the spot, so I don't want you to feel any sort of pressure. This is just like you taking an exam in a room by yourself at your screen. So with that, you create a workflow that uses a timer trigger. You wish to have the workflow now use a database trigger. You must do this with the least effort or disruption to the workflow possible. What should you do? one person looking up here. A couple people have come to an answer. I still see some looks of concern, some furrowed brows. We good? Okay. Let's move forward. It is delete the existing workflow and create a new one. The takeaway here is that after you've completed the wizard, you can't change the type of trigger that a workflow uses. So the example is right there. So that's right out of TechNet, because you can see the example. That's how I came up with this question. So it's a perfect example. And again, I wrote this question to illustrate the point. Again, for those who were in the previous session, we had a question that dealt with using the least administrative permissions necessary to do something. And the answer in that case was actually full administrator. That may or may not be typically what you would see, but it is to illustrate a point that, here all of those things sound viable, but they are not what would change the actual trigger for the workflow. Okay, you must make a new Service Manager service offering appear in the self-service portal. Which steps are required for this to occur? Good? Nodding? Nodding? So, okay, let's talk about it first and then I'll go back. So service offerings are logical groups of request offerings. You can publish them using the publish task or using a change request, but a change request is optional. When you publish a service offering by using the publish task, the service offering must contain at least one published request offering before it appears in the self-service portal. So my apologies about the actual item stem. It probably is missing a little bit. It should have said choose all that apply. So that it was a little bit vague in terms of which items are required. Sort of implied, but you would not see an item quite that shabby on the actual exams. It would clearly state, choose two or choose all that apply or select the best answers or something to that effect. So that was certainly missing from the stem. Everybody get that, or is that just? Yeah. So if items like this are not familiar to you, or if they don't ring a bell, then that's a good key that those are the sorts of things that you should go back and spend some of your review time on studying, brushing up on, reading about, researching, working on in your lab, so on and so forth. Okay, next question. You are planning to use the activity library in the Service Manager authoring tool to build some basic Windows Workflow Foundation workflows. Which default activity is not included in the activity library? Options, choices, yeah. Process of elimination, working your way through it. A guess from the back of the room? No. No? I don't know who said that, so I didn't look up, so I'm not going to embarrass anybody. Ready? Good? Yes? D. Operations Manager, Monitor Alert. So not a default activity. The Service Manager Activity Library includes the following types of activities: AD, Control Flow, VMM, Script, and Service Manager activities. Operations Manager is not a category of activities in the library.
I guess that would be part of 246, right? That's more on the... 247, yeah, because it's part of the connector.
Yeah. So, the next objective area, deploying resource monitoring, encompasses deploying end-to-end monitoring, so deploying agents, discover and deploying network device monitoring, import, configure management packs, and monitoring of a heterogeneous virtualization infrastructure, and then configuring end-to-end monitoring, so configuring overrides, dealing with synthetic transactions, configure outside-in monitoring, APM, distributed application models, integrating the monitoring infrastructure with GSM, Global Service Monitor. So, those are areas to certainly focus on. Make sure that those are within your wheelhouse. And then creating monitoring reports and dashboards, implementing service level tracking, implementing reports including chargeback reports, and Ops Manager data warehouse reports, and implementing dashboards. So, sample question. You need to connect VMM 2012 R2 with Operations Manager 2012 R2. What must you do? Choose all that apply. Ah, those pesky management pack requirements. And I know you're sitting there saying, well, when I install it, it's going to tell me what management packs I'm missing, and then I can just go install the... Yeah, I know. That's how I do it too, but this is an exam, so I apologize. Ready? Some guesses? Everybody pretty okay? Yeah. So in addition to installing the Ops Manager console on the VMM management server, you also have to import those the management packs that are highlighted in red above, because those are required. The two below are actually required by the IIS 7 management pack. So there's two additional dependencies that are not there. Is that completely realistic that you might see this as a question? Sure, it's possible. I mean, this is clearly not a verbatim question from the exams, because we don't do that. But something like this could be within the realm of possibility. So, when you see this, you either know it or you learn your lesson, and then when you get out of the exam, this is one of those things that you jot down that, hey, I'd better go brush up on this, make sure I get this memorized. Another sample question. You need to connect VMM 2012 R2 with Operations Manager 2012 R2. Hey, that was the same as the last question. What must you do? Choose all that apply. Exact same question, completely different answer choices. Most people are still reading fairly intently. We good? Yep. Okay, so as I illustrated in the previous session, for those who weren't there, you typically wouldn't see a choose all that apply with a single answer, but that doesn't mean that that's not possible to see that on an exam. Again, most of these questions I wrote to go through specific deep level exam knowledge, content, as well as to illustrate some points about the exams and the questions. The additional note here is you need to know the System Center. It shouldn't say products because they are not products, they are components. Intimately, to be prepared to address the potential questions on each exam. The best way to be prepared is to have actually done this yourself, have done the installation and configuration and monitoring and so on. That's typical for a full private cloud implementation. The other way is to read everything you can about the components and work with it in your lab, whatever, which is where, frankly, most of us, that's what we have to do. Most of you, I would guess, are not consultants out deploying private clouds for other organizations. You're in-house working for your organization. So it's kind of like previous certification exams when you'd be asked questions about domain level and forced functional levels and so on. Unless you're the AD architect and actually have schema admin and enterprise admin credentials, you've probably never done that at your organization, maybe in a lab. And if you've ever done it, you've done it at most once or twice. But it's those types of things that are within scope, completely on the radar for exams. Deploy resource monitoring. More questions in this area. You are deploying the Operations Manager 2012 agents on your private cloud resources. You are planning to do manual agent deployments on your systems in the perimeter network. What must you do to ensure these agents will install and be available in the Operations Manager console? Choose all that apply. This is a totally legitimate question. Not that my others aren't, but 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. Good enough? Ready? 5723, and use review new manual agent installations. As I had on the previous session and the previous deck, port number questions will probably appear on your exam, so expect that and know them. Another sample question, you have a System Center Operations Manager 2012 infrastructure deployed. You must implement Global Service Monitor. Choose the correct requirements below and order them accordingly. So choose all that apply and put them in the right order. Has anyone actually done this before? Wow. So do you know these answers pretty? You think, yeah? So something like option B, certainly goes to checking and making sure that you understand, is GSM supported on Operations Manager 2012, or does it require 2012 SP1? So requirements, there's ways of slipping those into questions as well. So let's move to the answer. Whoa, okay, that got super small. Oh, that's why. So 2012 SP1 is required. Second step is install Windows Identity Foundation on your management server, Ops Manager console servers. Restart the health service. Sign into the Commerce portal with an organizational account. Download and install the installer package to install GSM management packs. Click Start Subscription. Oh, okay, I'm going to go back. So, not an ideal question. Some of that is a little bit arguable. Okay, you could theoretically sign into the Commerce portal and download the installer package before you do steps 1, 2, and 3. So that, again, you wouldn't necessarily see that on the actual exam, but it goes to show that it's about the process, and this is the recommended order. Another sample question. The format of these keep changing. Deploy resource monitoring. You have a private cloud implementation using System Center 2012, VMM, Service Manager, and Operations Manager. You perform upgrades to 2012 R2 as shown. VMM, Operations Manager, Service Manager. Users report that chargeback reports no longer operate as expected. You must resolve this issue. What must you do? Okay. Answers selected. A and B. So post-upgrade to Service Manager 2012 R2, Service Manager won't have the correct version of the VMM management packs. Similarly, installing chargeback report files to Ops Manager 2012 R2 will fail as the dependencies folder will not contain the required management pack files. So this is sort of related to the question we had in the previous session about both the installation and the upgrade order of all of the different System Center components. So I basically built this question off of real life experiences that I've had. When you don't understand that or you're not following that strict order, you get caught with things like this. Okay, monitor resources. This whole area to me just screams Ops Manager, Ops Manager, Ops Manager, Ops Manager. Monitor network devices, analyze network device health, manage Ops Manager alerts and notifications, monitoring servers, so monitoring the operating system environment, managing System Center Operations Manager alerts, including automating resolution of alerts, managing notifications, implement and manage rules and monitors, configuring everyone's favorite audit collection services, ACS, including dynamic access control integration, monitoring the virtualization layer, so host and guest performance, virtual applications, Ops Manager alerts and notifications, APM, synthetic transactions, distributed applications. Again, this is the text verbatim from the objective domain. That's the boring part. The fun part is now questions, sample questions. You are troubleshooting System Center 2012 R2 Operations Manager Audit Collection Services, ACS. You need to configure the firewall to allow the ACS forwarder to reach the ACS collector. What should you do? C diagram. Yeah, it's got a little bit lost in the reformatting of the deck. This is the collector. This is the forwarder. It doesn't really matter. It just shows that they're separated by a firewall. So again, for those who weren't in the previous session, this question demonstrates a concept that we call parallelism. A and B are very similar to each other. To and from, port numbers. C and D, port numbers to and from. And then E and F are not parallel with each other, but ready? Yep. 51909. Was it what you thought? Was it everything it was cracked up to be? Okay. So don't be distracted. The takeaway here too is don't be distracted by other potentially viable or known port numbers. 443 or 749 or what have you. Port 88. You must know what's enabled to do ACS. I've never configured or enabled audit collection services, so this is one of those questions that I would either get wrong or I would have studied it and read it previously and memorized the port number. So you are the private cloud administrator. You're not going to see questions that start off like that again anymore. I just wanted to put that in there because it's kind of funny. Management has asked you to monitor certain network devices in your organization. The monitoring requests must use the most secure option available. Which method should you choose? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So that's about how long that should have taken you to answer. Not to shame anyone, but it should telegraph to you what you're looking for. When you scan those 4 answer choices, that one jumps right out at you. It is SNMP v3. Obviously because of the enhanced security that's available with v3. You need to monitor network devices using System Center 2012 R2. What port must you allow in your firewalls? Choose one. So, process of elimination, you're going to kick out B. You're going to kick out G. Ready? 161. SNMP is UDP 161. So, completely viable, legitimate type of question. It's fairly simplistic, but it's getting to a point. And it actually does validate a couple of different things at different levels there. Another sample question. You must monitor Unix and Linux computers in your organization. Well, I thought this was a Microsoft exam. What? Yes. Unix and Linux computers in your organization using Operations Manager 2012 R2. Which protocols are used by Ops Manager to communicate with the Unix and Linux computers? You might not like the answer to this. So, process of elimination. Which ones are you going to throw out right away? F, yeah. Yeah, that was a poor attempt at my part. I was probably late on a Friday. C and D, right? If you know what IPMI and Smash are all about, you're going to throw those out. SSH and Web Services for Management. So my note here is it says tricky because WinRM is the Microsoft implementation of the WS Management Protocol, which provides a secure way to communicate with local and remote computers. So, all right, configure and maintain service management. What is this objective start screaming to you? Little product called Service Manager, probably? Yeah. And we are all probably pretty crummy with Service Manager, except the guy in the back. Implementing service level management. So defining SLOs, SLAs, implementing SLA management and escalation, maintaining them, analyzing SLAs. Actually, let me go back. So in the previous section, there was one of the objectives was talking about dashboards. You remember? It's actually really, really hard to write a question about creating Operations Manager dashboards and reports because you just do it, and there's not a whole lot that you can ask a candidate about how to do it or what's totally right or what's totally wrong. It's just kind of doing it, or even a report. You're just creating the report or the dashboard. There's not a whole lot that's testable to kind of make up a word. So things like that to be aware of as well. Kind of putting yourself in the item writer's shoes as to what you can expect. So back to this, managing problems and incidents. So customizing problem management, linking incidents to problems and resolving them, raise, assign, and resolve incidents, root cause analysis, creating and managing a knowledge base, and then managing cloud resources. So deploying new apps, deploying VM or service, multi-tier applications using service templates, which we talked about in the previous session as well, and then managing applications in public and private, and VM hardware and self-service. Pretty broad. So let's look at some sample questions. You create a 2-tier service template in VMM named Service 1. You deploy 2 instances of Service 1 using the template. You now need to make changes to the Service 1 template. What should you do is missing. Choose the best answer. So this is one of those questions that if you've actually done this, it should, again, what we talked about previously, that this question should telegraph to you what the answer is that you're looking for. If you've done this, you've been caught by this, and you've cursed at your computer the first time this happens, and this will stick with you. You'll remember it. Ready? Edit the service template and save it with a new release value. So the note here is if you try to save changes to a service template that's been used as the basis for a deployed service, you need to save the service template with a new release value. It's just that simple. The name will remain the same. You'll see separate entries in the service templates node in the library for the 2 versions of the service template. So again, just working with service templates, spending that time in your lab, that's really the best way to absorb that, to get that knowledge. Next question. You are responsible for automating service management in your private cloud. You want to create a way to have different department help desk teams to be able to respond to incidents for their department only. What should you create in Service Manager to make this happen for the help desk teams? I don't even remember this question, so I'm not sure where this came from. Choose 2. What should you create? Choose 2. Automating service management. Have a way for different help desk teams respond to incidents for their department only. Got 1, 2. People got your choices? Pretty good? Ready to move on? Yes. Yeah. That's kind of a stinker. User role and a queue. So the takeaway here, the lesson is that you need to know how to implement Service Manager components. And this is certainly real world. And if you're not a Service Manager person, this is one of those things that you have to have read about or studied to really understand. So on this particular area, I included an additional slide. These are a little bit older in terms of resources, but they're still extremely, extremely useful. Full disclosure, I was actually in MCS, Microsoft Consulting Services, for a couple of years, and I was out at customers. I was actually the West Region private cloud guy, and I traveled all over the U.S. doing private cloud installations with 2012, and then subsequently 2012 R2. And I knew little to nothing about Service Manager. I could barely spell it. And this second resource here, it's not simply just adding a user to the group for an automated request offering. It's a full walkthrough of all of the pieces. And the top one, using the service catalog, that one has numerous links off of it that explain each piece. It's very, very good. So those are fantastic links. I would spend some time just reading through those, and that will get you a long way there if you're not super great with Service Manager. Manage configuration and protection. So managing compliance and configuration. Implementing security and compliance includes ITGRC Process Management Pack. The what? The ITGRC Management Pack. Again, so unless you've worked with it, this is right off of the outline objective domain for the exam. I see that, and I'm like, okay, I have to go read what that is because I have no clue. Analyze and remediate configuration compliance, analyze data in System Center Advisor, implement configuration compliance using Configuration Manager Desired Configuration Management, DCM. Wow, look at that. There's some Config Manager popping up on this exam, and it's called out right there in the objective. Update baselines in VMM. Managing updates, so updating machine roles in a service template, applications across multiple clouds, software updates to VMM infrastructure, virtual machines, and VM images. Deploying patches using Config Manager, and deploying patches using WSUS. So right there on the objective, they're pointing out, if I read that objective and I was writing items for that exam, I'd be like, ooh, teacher, let me write those. Because I'm going to write a whole bunch of items about the difference between deploying patches using Configuration Manager and deploying patches using WSUS. That automatically tells me that's ripe. That's a ripe area for questions. And then implementing backup and recovery. So backup and recover product settings, the cloud infrastructure, managing backups using DPM, business continuity for the cloud, checkpoints, DPM with Microsoft Azure Online Backup. Again, right in the objectives, in the outline. If you don't know much about Microsoft Azure Online Backup, that would be something I would go check out. So the first question, I love this question. I had a lot of fun writing this. I don't know if it's any good. You currently use DPM 2012 R2 to manage protection for a SQL Server system named SQL01. The DPM server is named DPM01. You learn that response times are too slow for the client applications that use SQL01 for their SQL Server databases. Your compliance department requires that the databases on SQL01 must be backed up at all times. You must address this issue without compromising the compliance requirements. What should you do? people are actually smiling while they're reading this. That's good. That warms my heart. So you must address this issue. What is the issue? The issue is really that response times are too slow for the client applications, right? The compliance department requiring that SQL's backed up at all times is just sort of a distractor, sort of a requirement. But the issue that you're addressing or that you have to solve is that response times are too slow. So sometimes these little bit longer questions, and this is nowhere near what a case study would be, but it's sometimes just reading and maybe rereading the item stem to really grasp what it is that you're actually trying or being asked to answer, right? Ready? Answer? C. Yeah. Network bandwidth usage throttling limits the amount of network bandwidth that DPM can use on the protected computer to create and synchronize replicas. Throttling helps ensure that the network bandwidth is available to applications on the protected computer other than just DPM, so that DPM isn't sucking up all the bandwidth. The MSI exec commands, totally legitimate. Those uninstall the DPM protection agent. So really just there as a distractor. Some people, again, still have kind of a mistaken belief that, an answer choice like B, because they have no idea what that is and it looks really complex and there's a GUID or whatever in there, they're like, oh yeah, it's got to be B, right? So, and Microsoft is certainly not trying to trick you. We're trying to validate your knowledge, right? So if you know the answer, and that one's even a little bit logical. So even if you don't know that, you can kind of decipher, well, QoS, I know what QoS is all about. I can, enable the packet scheduler, and then in the console, I select throttle computer. Yeah, that sounds totally legitimate. So I've never done that, but that sounds like the right thing. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes it is about just throwing a lot of text at you, and sometimes it's about confusion. Next question. You're using DPM 2012 R2 to manage backups for your private cloud infrastructure. You have a tape library attached to the DPM server. The tape library does not appear in the DPM administrator console. What must you do to resolve this? Select the best answer. So some parallelism here. You've got 3 PowerShell commands, an exe, and then a couple of GUI-based DPM console choices. You got it? I'm going to pick up the pace a little bit. We've got about 15 minutes left. Select rescan in the DPM console. And my note there, yes, believe it or not, tapes are still in use, perhaps all over the world. And this is within the scope of expected knowledge for the exam. A rescan will solve this issue. DPM drive mapping will remap a library that shows incorrectly, but not one that doesn't appear. Sample question. You are the private cloud administrator. You've been asked to provide data recovery protection for a web server in the DMZ, or the perimeter network. What must you do to provide the requested recovery protection? Choose all that apply. You know how there's always different requirements for things that are in perimeter networks or DMZs. Those are always ripe areas to know, because everybody is pretty familiar with what requirements are for things that are domain joined in your internal environment. Perimeter networks always introduce some additional requirements, so those are always good. Not niche areas, but little corner areas, because those are completely legitimate. Those are good areas to delve into. Everybody got? Ready? DPM agent installer on the web server and ports 5718 and 5719. So if you've done this before or read about it, you might remember this. If you haven't, you probably wouldn't know those port numbers. And if you're guessing, you're guessing. So the takeaway is you should know how to deploy and implement DPM protection for your cloud resources. And again, the note about things being in the DMZ or a perimeter network. So in review, hopefully this was a little bit fun. These sessions can be a little bit dry. I mean, you're subjecting yourself almost to a little bit of a sample exam, so hopefully this was a little more fun than that. Hopefully it was educational and helped illustrate item types, the question types, the formats, what to expect, and help give you some preparation. Everybody's at a different stage in terms of their preparation for taking these exams. Some of you, this might be the last thing that you're doing before you take it. Some of you, this might be the first thing that you're doing on your path to exploring these exams. So each one of you will take something different away from these sessions. So I do appreciate particularly those of you who are here for both sessions. Hopefully it was worthwhile. The major takeaway is just be prepared for, it's the Boy Scout motto, be prepared. Be prepared for everything that you could possibly imagine you might need to be prepared for. And with that, I think we're going to end a little bit early. We're right before lunchtime. I'll certainly take questions. Yeah, please.
What is the best resource to study this exam?
The best resource. So let me move forward. Here we go. Resources. That's perfect. Microsoft Learning Site is your one-stop location for all the information on the certifications. And there's also great links off of there to training, courses, and so on that are available. I strongly recommend the second one, Microsoft Virtual Academy. It is surprising how not well known that is to our community. And I talk to people about MVA as much as I can, as often as I can, because it's truly fantastic. It's all sorts of fantastic free webinars, presentations, hands-on labs, everything. That's really where I would tell people to start. Start on MVA, go through everything that's there, whatever is there that's relevant to what you're preparing for, and then branch out from there. If you want to buy books after that, buy books. If you want to attend a training course, attend a training course from some of my fellow fantastic, MCTs all over the world, wherever you live. TechNet virtual labs are good. Yeah, I mean there is a lot of. So like one of the problems that comes up is like the two Azure exams are both fairly new. There's very little that's available out there right now in terms of resources for preparing for those. So, and I believe I said it at the end of the previous session, I encourage people strongly to take the exams as soon as they can after they come out, just because they haven't been updated or refreshed, and you're validating as close to possible as to what the current product releases are. At the same time, the disadvantage you have there is the lack of preparation materials that are available if you're doing that. So everybody's got their own approach, their own process. Training and certification guide, they've got a link to the application here. It's an interactive app that just kind of shows the paths. That's kind of neat to give you a feel for where you're at and what you need to take. But the first two links are probably the most relevant, particularly MVA. Any other questions? I think that's the last slide. It is. Any other questions? No? Okay, thank you all very much. I appreciate it.